Hello everyone, my name is Elena, aka Mintimito, and if you're new here, welcome, and if you're not, welcome back to my channel where I do fun art challenges and talk about whatever's on my mind. And today I'm going to be exposing some of my old, embarrassing, cringy crossover fan art. But before we get into that, I have a quick announcement. I just started a new comic series about personal finance with my older sister over on Instagram. It's called The Fundamentals. Get it? Fund. Money. You get it. So my sister is like a genius, a math whiz. She knows a lot about money. She's read over 50 books on personal finance and she likes to help others out in terms of financial education. And I can draw. So that's why we're teaming up. I'll have the link to our account down in the description and we'll be posting new comics every Friday, so go check it out if you're interested, and back to the video. So for those of you who might not know what crossover fan art is, I'll explain briefly. If you were a little art nerd growing up like me, you've probably engaged in your fair share of fandoms throughout your life, and I'm still very much a multi-fandom artist to this day. But sometimes you get so hooked on these different franchises that you start to wonder, what would it be like if I combined my favorite characters and concepts from different media? So then you use your artistic powers to illustrate a new, oftentimes cursed, creation. And this is something I think a lot of fan artists like to engage in. Some of these crossover ideas get so popular that they end up spawning whole new fandoms based on the crossover alone. Raise your hand if you're a hashtag Jelsa shipper. Come on, don't be shy. I know you're out there. One of my favorite crossover fan art phenomenons in recent years is the Disney x Jujutsu Kaisen shipping trend. I don't know what's going on, but also why are Nanami and Tiana kind of cute together actually? As for me, crossover fan art is something that I would engage in pretty frequently, especially in middle school, because that's where you become your most authentic, cringy self, I guess. And as a middle school fan artist, there were several franchises that I was obsessed with, but four in particular were especially important to me, and those franchises were Sailor Moon, Sonic, no surprise there, Vampire Knight, and last but certainly not least, Archie Comics, aka the series that eventually led to the creation of everyone's favorite TV drama, Riverdale. So throughout middle school and some of high school, I definitely made fan art where I combined these franchises in my art in various ways, and some of them I even made multiple iterations of over the years. And my goal for this video was to recreate at least one of these crossovers, and I went to my Instagram stories and the YouTube community tab to see which crossover sounded the most interesting to you guys, and the people have overwhelmingly spoken on both platforms. Y'all want to see some Sonic x Sailor Moon content, so that is what I will be creating in this video today. And this is a super fun matchup, so I'm not upset about it, but honestly, I was hoping y'all would pick something a bit more chaotic. Shout out to the people who picked Sonic x Vampire Knight. But the art for today's video will be a crossover between Sonic and Sailor Moon, but throughout the video, I will also share images of other cursed crossover fan art I did back in the old days, starting with this one, my original Sonic x Sailor Moon fan art piece. This is one of my oldest crossover drawings, I think, and funnily enough, I also think it's the least cringe. It's honestly kind of cute. I'll also be talking about all of these fandoms and how they played a role in my art journey, so it'll be a fun and slightly embarrassing time for me. This is going to be another classic Mintimito rambles about art and nerd stuff type of video, so feel free to grab your tablet or sketchbook to draw along with me, or just grab a snack or a drink just to tag along for the ride, and let's get into it. Welcome to the time-lapse, everyone. It is raining outside as I'm recording, so if you can hear any noisiness, I am so sorry about that. But as I mentioned earlier, I will be creating Sonic x Sailor Moon crossover fan art in this video, and I decided to create 6 pieces in total. I know, I was doing a bit too much, and that's why this video is technically a week late, but we'll move on from that. The first 5 are basically a recreation of the image I showed you guys earlier, where it was all the Sailor Scouts as Sonic characters, and so I just decided to redraw them all individually. All of them except for Tuxedo Mask. Sorry to any Tuxedo Mask fans out there, all 2 of you. My bad, I just didn't feel like it. And for the 6th image, I decided to do one drawing where I drew Sonic characters as Sailor Scouts, if you can understand the difference. But basically that one is Hijinka humanized versions of Amy, Cream, Rouge, Blaze, and Wave all as Sailor Scouts. So it was a fun concept. I ended up really struggling with that one, but you will see more about that later on in the video. Also, for the other cringy throwback crossover fan art that I did back in the day, I'm thinking I will reveal them in between each time lapse because there's a good chunk of them, and you can think of it as like a little reward, a little treat in between each artwork that I'm doing for this video. And I'll show them in order of how unhinged or unlikely or nonsensical the crossover is. And I don't have too much to say about the process behind each of these first 5 character drawings. However, if I do have something of note to say about that drawing in particular, then I will say it at the beginning of each time lapse. For this first one, I don't have too much to say, just I want to give props to my middle school self for assigning Sailor Moon as a bunny. That is literally the perfect, there is no other animal you can assign her. I know I grew up watching the English dub of Sailor Moon, but in the original Japanese, her name is Usagi, which means rabbit / bunny, and there's a lot of bunny and rabbit motifs in Sailor Moon to represent her character. So aside from all the rabbit motifs, it's also a perfect assignment because the long ears are also really reminiscent of her pigtails as a human. So literally this is how you draw a Sonic character version of Sailor Moon. There's no other way to do it. So shout out to me in middle school for having that insight. And I also really liked all the animals that I picked for that fan art that I did, and so I ended up just keeping all of them the same for my recreation of it, which brings me to the end of this first drawing and the beginning of revealing my cringy old crossover fan art. All right, let's start with the first one. All right, not too bad. I mean, the art is not good, but conceptually not too wild, not too out there. It's pretty similar to the one that I showed you guys first, except this time we have the characters from the Archie comics basically cosplaying as the Sailor Scouts and Tuxedo Masks. So we have Betty as Sailor Moon, Midge as Sailor Mercury, Veronica Sailor Mars, Ethel as Sailor Jupiter, and then Cheryl as Sailor Venus. And I do remember putting a lot of thought into this. Oh yeah, also Reggie as Tuxedo Mask. I really just forget about him. That's so crazy. Anyways, I remember putting a lot of thought into this at the time. I mainly was just trying to get like the hairstyle or something about the hair to match the original anime character when I drew this, and so I felt like obviously Betty would be Sailor Moon because she's blonde, and then Veronica as Sailor Mars because she's got long black hair, Midge as Sailor Mercury because she's the only one with really short hair basically. Cheryl, I felt like she fit Sailor Venus like character wise, especially in terms of being really confident and capable. Also, I had to include Cheryl somewhere. She's iconic. As well as Ethel. Ethel, I believe in some versions of the Archie comics, she's like a really good baker, and I think that's a thing with Sailor Jupiter too, so I thought that was a cute little connection there. Yeah, that was basically all the thought I put into it. Archie's not on it because he does not have black hair, but Reggie does. And Reggie is also useless, so... Oh my gosh, please. I don't want this to turn into a Tuxedo Mask slander video, but it might be. Anyways, so if I were to put a year on it, I'd say this was probably done like 2006, 2007. Yeah, let's move on to the next drawing. And the next drawing I did was Sailor Mercury, and I drew her as a hedgehog, and I'm pretty sure the only reason I decided that when I was younger was because I wanted to basically just give her Amy's hairstyle. And that's basically all I've got to say on that. It went pretty smoothly. So now I guess we can get into talking about all these different fandoms that I was really obsessed with and how they impacted my art journey. So let's kick this off. I'll start with Sailor Moon because it's the earliest one on this list. It was one of my first obsessions, fascinations that inspired me to draw. Who doesn't love Sailor Moon? Who doesn't love magical girls? And it was my first anime, although it took a pretty long time before I got into anime again. I actually wasn't allowed to watch most anime growing up. My mom said Dragon Ball Z was too violent, and I think there were other ones that also I was not allowed to watch. So in terms of how Sailor Moon impacted my art style and my art journey, I'd say it started off a lot of things. My love for characters, my love for the anime aesthetic, although that didn't really solidify until later on when I got into Vampire Knight, which I'll talk more about that later, but definitely just bright colors, I'd say. And also I used to have these, or actually I still have at least one of them, these Sailor Moon booklets that had character bios and descriptions of everyone's powers detailing the lore a little bit and describing the villains. You know, it was like this little information booklet. It was very kid friendly, you know, nothing too intense, but I remember being so obsessed with the illustrations in them, thinking it was the coolest thing ever to like read things about the characters. And that's probably what started my interest in creating OCs and making character bios for them. I would never get to the point of writing a full story. I would always just be so obsessed with making the character bios, and I feel like those Sailor Moon books definitely contributed to that. I think it also helped me form a love and appreciation for feminine aesthetics and female characters in general. I ended up mostly drawing women and girls for most of my life, which brings us to the end of this drawing of Sailor Mercury the Hedgehog, and it also brings us to the next embarrassing crossover fan art reveal, so let's see what this one is. Okay, we're getting slightly into cursed territory, but this one is surprisingly relevant to each other. What you're looking at here is the Archie Comics main cast as Sonic characters, and so you'll see Archie is in the middle and he's a hedgehog. Oh my gosh, please. So hard to look at. Betty is a bunny. Veronica looks like she's an echidna. Jughead looks like a fox. Reggie also looks like a fox, maybe a cat. It looks like Dilton up in the left corner, some kind of cat maybe. Midge, I don't even know. I believe Moose is a lion. Why didn't I make him a moose? It was right there. Jason and Cheryl Blossom look like they are bats, and it looks like Nancy and Chuck on the bottom right are also foxes. Or Chuck is a cat and Nancy is a fox based on the ear sizes. I'm not sure. Anyways, very interesting. I like how I defaulted to a cat or a fox for most of them. And I'm pretty sure I only made Archie a hedgehog because he's the main character. So I wanted him to be a hedgehog like Sonic, who's the main character of his franchise. Anyways, these two properties are actually related, and I will get into a story about that later on in the video. But yeah, let's get into the next drawing. And stop looking at this. It's so cringe. For the next drawing, we have Sailor Mars as a cat, and not too much to report on this. I was having trouble drawing her because I had her head tilted up slightly, and for some reason it threw me off and the proportions looked all wonky. I ended up making a bunch of adjustments with the liquify tool towards the end, and I like how it turned out ultimately. But yes, that was one struggle that I had with this one. But aside from that, pretty good process, and now I can move on to talking about the next step in my fandom art journey, which was Archie Comics, which started when my mom bought me my first Archie comic back when I was in 4th grade. And that is how I ended up getting really into Archie and that universe. Getting that first Archie comic was a core memory for me because that moment is what made me think to myself, like, wow, I want to do this. I want to make things like this. I want to tell stories. I want to create characters that people care about. That series, I know it's like cringe and such a meme now because of Riverdale, but it is a really, really important series to me. So you'll see that a lot of the crossover fan art that I'm going to reveal to you guys is honestly Archie/Riverdale related as a result. One of these days I'm going to do a video dedicated to my Archie obsession and my Riverdale fan art era because that was a whole thing back when I was in college. Archie comics definitely contributed a lot to my art style, and I used to exclusively draw in an Archie comic style until I started getting into manga later in middle school. I really enjoyed in the old Betty and Veronica digests. Throughout the comics there would be these little spreads of Betty and or Veronica in these different fashion illustrations, and so they'd be wearing these cute outfits, trying new hairstyles. It was so cute and fun, and I remember those things being my favorite part of the comics, and I loved drawing them or coming up with my own outfits to put on the characters. It was really fun for me. It made me appreciate the design of clothing on characters. I think Archie comics also awoke the shipping gene in me. I was so obsessed with the drama surrounding Betty versus Veronica, who was gonna get Archie, and I really thought in my heart of hearts that I was going to get an answer. You don't get an answer, that's the point of the story. But I must confess, I was also a Bughead shipper based on nothing. Based on absolutely nothing, because back then there were crumbs. It was not canon in any story. There was like 1 or 2 individual comics where Jughead like says something nice to Betty or just treats her really well. Me and I guess a bunch of people online, we just latched onto that and we're like, this is a new ship, this is a new couple, this is this is the ship to root for. So when Riverdale came out, I remember tweeting like, I hope that Betty and Jughead become canon in this. And then it did, and it was this this big thing. People were tweeting #Bughead. It was so wild. Imagine being a Bughead shipper before it was canon and then it becoming canon. I lost my mind. That has nothing to do with art, but maybe shipping is an art on its own. I'm reaching. Anyways, that's the end of this drawing, which means it's also time to see the next old crossover fan art. So let's check it out. Okay. I can explain. Can I? I don't know if I can explain this one. Okay, so I think the way that this one happened was somebody on DeviantArt, I think, asked if I could draw the Archie characters as if they were the Heartless from Kingdom Hearts, and if it sounds like I'm saying that awkwardly, it's because I've never played Kingdom Hearts and I don't know what the Heartless is. I think it's like the enemy. I don't know if the characters take on an evil Heartless form or not. I basically just like saw the symbol and I saw glowing yellow eyes and I ran with that. I don't know what the outfits are based on. Truly, I don't know the details. I don't remember how it happened, but I think I had fun with it. I think I was proud of myself for how colorful I made it, but otherwise, I don't have any comment. Let's move on, please, to the next drawing. Thank you. So next up, I am drawing Sailor Jupiter as a fox, and the only thing I have to say about this one is that it's my favorite out of these first 5 characters that I drew. I don't know what happened, but I feel like the final result has a lot more depth and the lighting and coloring just looks better, which is strange because I used the same process for each of them, but I think I accidentally achieved a more pleasing and realistic result with this one, which is cool but also not cool, because if I did it accidentally, that means I don't know how I achieved it really. So I'm gonna take notes on these processes and learn from them for future Sonic characters that I draw, because I really do like how this one turned out. But yeah, that's the only thing I have to say about this one. I love how it turned out, especially because I was really worried that with her little funky pose that Sailor Jupiter does, I thought it was gonna look really awkward, but it ended up turning out really nicely, and so I'm very happy with this one. So we left off talking about how I got into Archie comics and how they impacted me, and then sometime after that I got into Sonic. I believe we just had the Sonic Heroes game on GameCube for some reason, and I really enjoyed playing the game, but I also became obsessed with drawing the characters because of the character information in the little booklet. And at first I was just drawing them for my brother because he also liked the game, but then I just really got into doing it for myself. Here's the crazy thing, because right now I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, oh, you were into Archie comics and so that's how you got into Sonic, because most people know that Archie Comics is the company that originally made the Sonic comics. Now the Sonic comics are being made by IDW Publishing, but originally it was being done by the Archie Comics company. And no, I did not know that. I had no idea about that until way later on in high school, when I'm pretty sure the conversation went like, oh, you like Archie and you like Sonic, so you read the Sonic comics. And I was like, I knew that the Sonic comics existed, but I didn't know that they were made by the Archie Comics company. And so somebody had pointed that out to me. They're like, yeah, you know, the Archie Comics makes the Sonic comics. I almost shit myself from how shocked I was and how excited and happy that made me. I had no idea that my 2 favorite, most intense obsessions were canonically in real life related. They're being made by the same company, at least in comic form. And so that absolutely blew my mind. If you didn't know that, hopefully it blows your mind too. But yeah, no, it's crazy that I got into Archie and Sonic separately and had no idea for years that that the Sonic comics were being made by the same company that makes the Archie comics. It just, yeah, I don't know. It's so funny to me every time I think about that. Which makes my fan art that I showed you guys earlier even funnier. The one where I drew all the Archie cast as Sonic characters, because back when I drew that, I had no idea they had an actual connection in real life. Like, I just thought I was being LOL, so random. But that's the end of the Sailor Jupiter time lapse, so let's move on and see the next old crossover fan art that I made. Alrighty boys, now we're getting into the good stuff. Okay, so this is unfinished, but it is so peak middle school Elena, because this is Vampire Knight fan art. It's the Vampire Knight main trio as Sonic characters. I can't, this is it's getting a bit repetitive, right? Like, I keep drawing characters from other franchises as Sonic characters. It's what I do. Anyways, no explanation, not much to say here. I didn't finish it. Very funny that I didn't finish Kaname because I really could not stand him. I hated him so bad. I hated him even more by the end of the story, absolutely. I was always a Zero girl, but I'll talk more about that in a bit. Let's move on to the next time lapse. So the last of the Sailor Scouts as Sonic characters drawings that I did is, of course, Sailor Venus, and I drew her as a bat. I'm not sure what made me decide that when I was younger. I think I just ran out of character species, so I made her a bat. I didn't end up drawing her wings. I remember conceptually wanting to include that in this drawing, but I think I just forgot, so whatever. The only thing I was kind of struggling with on this one was her arm that is pointing upwards. I was afraid of it covering her eye too much and it looking weird, but I think I was able to work it out. And I noticed at the end that my original drawing, I had her fur color to be orange and then her hair was yellow, and in this drawing I ended up making her hair and fur and just her whole body color yellow. I'm not sure if it's a bit much, but I think making her orange with her outfit also being orange would have also been much, so I think ultimately it works out. That's all I've got to say about this one. And I realized we left off in the last section talking about how I got into Sonic after getting into Archie comics, and I didn't really touch on how Sonic has impacted my art style, but I don't know, maybe does that speak for itself? Like, I am still drawing Sonic characters to this day. I did take a big break from it starting in around college to later on in my adulthood. I think the first Sonic movie is what really inspired me to get back into drawing Sonic fan art casually. I got really back into it and I'm still loving it, still having a great time, and it feels really good to just be engaged with the fandom like this again because I took such a long break from it, and I love Sonic so much. It feels so good to be tapping into this childhood interest of mine that really impacted my art journey so much. I drew so many Sonic characters. I came up with my own OCs, I came up with the kids that I thought the Sonic characters would have when all my favorite ships got together, that sort of thing. It's been a journey that's ongoing till I die, you know? But if there's anything else about the Sonic art style that I'd say influences my art overall, I think definitely the really bold type of shading that you find in the Sonic Adventure artwork, especially that style definitely influences all of my art, Sonic or not. So yeah, I'd say bold colors and unique shading and bold line art as well. I think all of those things ended up playing a role in my art in general. And that brings us to the end of this time lapse, which means it's time to see the next beautiful old crossover fan art that I made back in the old days. So let's see it. Okay, so hear me out. This one, it is unhinged. However, I would argue that it makes sense. Basically, I was going to say it's Shadow cosplaying a Zero from Vampire Knight. However, the blood on his mouth makes me think that my intention at the time was that he is Zero in this drawing. So picture this, if you haven't seen Vampire Knight, or if you don't know who Shadow the Hedgehog is for some reason. So Zero has gun, Shadow also have gun. They are both emo icons. They both have black and red in their aesthetic. They both are kind of rude. They both have tragic pasts. And they were both my favorite characters in each of these franchises. It's clear that I had a type of character that I liked. I stand by this. I don't know what to tell you. I stand by it. It's badly drawn, yes, but conceptually, I stand by this. And that's it. So let's move on to the next time lapse. And now we are at the final time lapse of the video. Finally, this is going to be probably my longest video on my channel once this is done. But I know for the other time lapses, I briefly discussed the process at the beginning of them. But for this one, it was a journey. So I'm going to save my discussion of the process for after I finish talking about the fandoms that impacted me the most. And the last one we're going to talk about is, of course, the legendary Vampire Knight. So basically, the story behind me getting into Vampire Knight. Like I said, I didn't really watch a lot of anime when I was younger, aside from like Sailor Moon and, you know, Pokemon would come on. Those sorts of things, the 4Kids stuff. Like, I watched that growing up a bit, but I wasn't really into anime or manga. And my mom wanted to change that. So she started buying me Shoujo Beat magazine. For those of you who don't know, it's an old monthly originally a magazine all about anime culture, and it was targeted towards girls. And so Shonen Jump is like the original concept that's really popular and I believe is still going on. And Shoujo Beat was sadly canceled eventually, and I was so sad. Yeah, that's how I got into Vampire Knight, because it was one of the serialized manga in the magazine, and I didn't really read it at first because when my mom bought me a copy of Shoujo Beat, some of the stories were pretty early on, so I was able to catch on to what they were about. But Vampire Knight seemed too complicated, I just skipped over it. But my mom would also read through the magazines, and she really liked Vampire Knight, even though she didn't really know what was going on. So she wanted me to get into it, and she started buying me the manga volumes, and then I was able to also get really into it. And honestly, I was really loving it. I thought it was such a cool concept. I loved the story. I loved the characters, especially Zero. But sadly, oh man, I need to control myself before I start yapping about Vampire Knight and how it goes absolutely off the deep end. If you know, you know. You know? But if I start talking about the plot twist in Vampire Knight that made me stop reading the story, I'm going to be talking forever. So let's just move forward and talk about how this series impacted me as an artist. There was certainly a lot to take from the art style of Matsuri Hino, who is the mangaka for Vampire Knight. Just an absolutely gorgeous, stunning, unique art style, unlike anything I've seen in other manga, really. I love her work so much. I have the Vampire Knight art book. I loved looking at the illustrations she made for the covers and in between chapters, and when she made posters for Shoujo Beat. Just so many amazing illustrations, and I'm pretty sure she primarily used Copic markers for her coloring, which is wild to me, but they looked so beautiful and I really admired how painterly the colors looked. She also had really unique and eye-catching compositions. Even if there were a lot of characters in the scene, it always felt really clear, and she would capture a lot of really small details but never make it seem too busy. I really should have studied her work before I made this drawing in particular, because wow, it was so difficult, but I will get to that in a second. Basically, I feel like Matsuri Hino helped me realize that I wanted to have a distinctive voice in my art. I really enjoyed her art style and loved it a lot and tried to emulate it and studied it a lot when I was younger, but I never wanted to have like the same art style as her. I never wanted to depict characters in exactly the same way. It was more so I really just admired her skill level, her technical abilities, just how she approached her work and her visuals. Just so stunning. I can't praise it enough. It's really beautiful. I still really admire it. And she was one of the first artists, I think, that made me feel that way. That was a big ramble. But yeah, so she influenced me quite a lot, and talking about her just makes me want to go comb through the art book, because leading into this drawing that you're seeing on screen right now, where do I even begin? There is so much I want to say, not just about the process, but really about why I wanted to approach the drawings I did in this video, including the ones before this one, why I approached them in the way that I did. I guess I'll touch on why I'm approaching these drawings in a specific way and why it's important. So basically, I don't want to overcomplicate this, but I mentioned in my previous video that one of my goals that I'm going to be trying to actively pursue is to open an online store and to start tabling at conventions. Now, I don't want you to get confused, because both of these things are things that I have done before. I had an artist alley table twice in the past, 2017 and 2018. I participated in a gallery a couple years ago, and I had an online store that I opened in 2018, and it was pretty short-lived. All this to say, basically, I could attribute a lot of things to why these were unsuccessful endeavors at the time. Ultimately, it came down to my mentality, my mental health, where I was, what I was dealing with. I just gave up on myself. I didn't believe that I could be successful in those avenues, which is really sad, and I don't like thinking about it for very long. So the good news is that lately I've been feeling more confident both in my art and in my marketing abilities, and so I really want to shift how I approach artwork to think about the marketability of my work. Not for everything, of course, because I want to have room for creativity and stuff, but one of the biggest mistakes I made in the past, I would end up doing these events or opportunities like my store, the conventions, etc. I would do them pretty last minute. I would try to just throw everything together together, I didn't really have a plan. And especially for when I did Artist Alley and I was trying to collect items to sell, I would basically just go through all of my digital files and be like, oh, this, maybe somebody would buy this, and then I'd print it out. And it wouldn't matter if it was created at a weird size. I wouldn't adjust the size to be on a standard print size or anything. There would be wonky sizes like 10 by 11 or a small square, things that people usually don't see at conventions. You know, there are pretty standard print sizes that people go for, like 8 by 10s, 11 by 17, etc. And I definitely didn't keep any of those things in mind because there would usually be these haphazard last minute efforts when I engaged in these opportunities. And so I want to actually have a strategy going into my new online store / convention goals, basically a goal to have art products and not just art that I haphazardly print out at the last second. And what that means is when it comes to creating finalized illustrations, you know, I tend to have an idea or an intention behind the work that I make. I think I'm at that point, at least, to where I'm like, I want this to be fully colored rendered illustration, or I want this to be a sketch, I want this to be just practice or a study, whatever it may be. But now I'm adding on an extra layer where I'm thinking, I want this to potentially be a sticker, I want this to potentially be a bookmark, I want this to potentially be a print, things like that. And so I'm trying to add that extra layer so that way I can literally, at the very least, have the technical specs of what I'm working on prepared. And so the first 5 illustrations that you saw, they were all made on canvases that are smaller than what I usually do, but they're large enough to where if I wanted to turn them into stickers, I could do that. And I'm not saying that those illustrations are going to become stickers. Like, if you're interested, you can let me know, but it's more so me getting the practice of working in that way and with that sort of mindset. And so the illustration you're seeing now is me practicing what it'd be like if I were working on something that could be turned into a print, specifically an 8 by 10 print. You'll see a thin light border pop on and off throughout the time lapse. That's me trying to keep in mind the bleed for if I were to ever try to get this printed and need to get it cut down and things like that. So it's just those little things that I really wasn't keeping in mind before that now I do want to keep it in mind just in case I do turn something into a product. So again, doesn't mean that this would be a product I sell, but it means that the things that I work on, I am thinking about that in advance, if that makes sense. So there's a good and bad side to this in my discovery of approaching my work this way so far. The good news is I feel like I've realized that if there's something I know I'd want to be a sticker at most, I feel pretty good about those, you know, just a character floating in space. I got that down. You know, what I don't have down is a complete illustrated piece that feels finalized, if that makes sense. So something that would be a print. In the past, you know, I've made prints, and again, they weren't originally intended to be prints. It was just things I drew on my iPad, and then I was like, oh, this is fan art, so maybe somebody would buy it, I'll get it printed. But, you know, they weren't finalized illustrations. And working on this made me realize that I don't think I've done a really, truly finalized illustration in many years. It's been a very, very long time. And anytime I have done finalized illustrations in the past, they were still, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're just very simple, and there's not much of a background. And I'm not saying there needs to be like a perfectly well lit scene for every background. I don't even know if that's the sort of approach I want to have in my art. But, you know, it's just not something I think about. I think about characters floating in space. And it's funny because in this drawing, they're literally floating in space. Anyways, basically, I just don't know how to finalize an illustration in a way that I'm satisfied with. I can use my little tricks to make things look better, but I feel like I'm not planning well enough from the beginning. I'm still in a place where I have to do a lot of problem solving throughout the process because I haven't tried to make finished illustrations in so long. And when I have in the past, they've been exceedingly simple and definitely not more than one character in the piece. I think the only finished illustrations I've done that I'd consider to be like finalized were all pieces with a single character in them. And I want to be somebody who can have more than one character in a piece and have it not feel too busy, you know, like Matsuri Hino. And it's interesting because there are pieces I've seen, prints I've bought where it's just a character floating on a background, and I really like them, but they have something different that I can't quite achieve. And I think a few key issues that I struggle with visual hierarchy, being able to really pinpoint what the viewer is supposed to look at first and then second, third, and so on. I also struggle with cohesion and balance overall. Whenever I attempt to do something with this many characters or more than one thing going on, it just feels too busy because I'm probably putting too much effort into everything on the piece and not trying to draw the viewer towards a certain point, or I'm not thinking about the composition overall and how to lead the eye through the piece. Things like that, you know, something that I know about technically, but I just don't really think about it in my natural process because I'm used to just drawing a single character on a plain background. And it would be fine if I did that as long as I could also figure out just general balance and understanding what it means to be done with a piece, because I don't know because I haven't taken the time to figure that out. I don't know what finished looks like for me. I realized just now that I've been talking so much about Vampire Knight and then about my frustrations with art that I didn't even talk about literally what I'm drawing. I mentioned it earlier, but to clarify, 5 of the main Sonic girls and their humanized Gijinka Sailor Scouts now. So Amy is central figure, well, she's to the left, but she's the main figure. Then there's Cream, Blaze, Wave, and Rouge. And I tried to adjust all of their Sailor Scout uniforms to closer match their canon main Sonic outfits. So that's the illustration that I'm doing. And certain problem solving things that I'm happy with. I'm really happy that I changed Amy's pose. I'm really happy with the one that I ended up doing. What I'm not a fan of is how I fit all the other characters around her. It was just a lot, and I'm okay with the final result. I am. However, I do think it still looks pretty busy. I was overly relying on blending modes. I should have mapped out the colors overall before I went into separating the layers and trying to get all the details down. And I feel like this is one of those ones where laying down all the colors first and trying to figure out generally what the overall vibe is going to be by the end, that would have been a much better approach than just trying to work on everything separately. I think with something this big with this many things going on, it just was not a good idea for me to try to work on everything separately and then bring it all together at the end. I think I should have started by trying to bring everything together at the beginning and then fixing the individual elements later on. But, you know, it's a learning process. It is what it is. I'm not mad at the final result, but I do think if I wouldn't completely start the piece over, but I would definitely start from quite earlier on in the process, sadly. But that's okay. As long as I have fun with it, you know, and as long as I'm learning, it's the joy and the pain of art at the same time. So obviously I have a lot of ideas for how I would approach this piece differently if I were to have another go at it. I'm not sure if it would involve starting over completely, but it would involve quite a bit of reworking and way more planning, especially with the composition and the coloring. If you have any ideas in regards to those notes, whether it be a specific composition I could try, or any tips on how to make really colorful scenes with lots of characters still feel cohesive and not overloaded and busy, please let me know. I'd love to know any tips that any of you guys might have, or any artists that you think achieves this type of effect really well. I was going for the vibe of just, you know, the classic Sailor Moon posters where all the characters are there, but of course I wanted to do it in my super detailed approach to coloring, and I don't think it worked. So feel free to let me know any tips you may have, and especially any artists that you think achieve this. But that was a very long section. Oh my gosh, it definitely matches the time spent on this illustration in comparison. To note for anybody curious, the first 5 illustrations of the Sailor Scouts as Sonic characters took between 2 to 3-ish hours each, and this one took, type your answer in the comments, type it right now. What's your guess? It took a grand total of 26 hours and 24 minutes. That is a very long time. I haven't spent that long on a piece in forever, but as you can tell, there was a lot of back and forth and starting over and redrawing a bunch of things. I really just wasn't sure where I was going with it. So that's what happens when you're trying to figure things out and you're trying to learn, and that's okay. But that brings us officially to the end of this drawing and almost the end of this video. We have one more set of lovely crossover fan art to show off, and after showing my frustration throughout the process of the last drawing, I feel like it's less embarrassing to show this fan art now. So let's take a look at it, baby. So as you can probably tell, this is 3 iterations of the same concept. I believe the one on the far left was made the earliest, the one on the far right was made the latest, sometime in high school, and these are Archie characters dressed as if they went to the school that's in the Vampire Knight manga, which is a school with a day class which wears black uniforms and then a night class which wears white uniforms, and also the night class are all secretly vampires. So yeah, and you can tell I was also trying to emulate Metsuri Hino's art style in these, which is funny. It's cool to see how I improved a bit over time, and also how I was trying to do the masterful thing that she does where she fits all these characters into the same scene and they're all sort of draping over each other and looking elegant and beautiful, and mine does not do that, but that is okay. And we're finally done embarrassing me. Here are all of the artworks that I made in this video. It was lots of fun until it wasn't. And if you do like the last drawing, feel free to let me know, but for me, I just think there's something more. I could do something significantly more appealing because I believe in my skill. It's not me being too harsh on myself, I think. I really feel like I could take this concept and do something so much better, but despite all my complaints, this was a really good learning process, and I hope that hearing me talking about how frustrating it was and also how much time I spent on it, hopefully you guys also feel seen in knowing that it's okay to spend lots of time on your work. It's okay to have critiques for yourself, to want to improve. It is all part of the process. Just remember to also have fun with it and not be so hard on yourself that you hate your art. That is never the goal. The goal is to grow as much as you can, have a great time, and never give up on pursuing your artistic dreams. Oh my gosh. Thank God I'm done. It is 2 a.m. the day I'm supposed to upload this video. That's my fault. I took too long on that art, and I took too long editing today. I kept getting distracted because I didn't write a script beforehand. I learned that I need to have a script or else I can't get anything done. I keep getting distracted while I'm trying to record or in between each take that I have. So anyways, all my important links are in the description. If you're interested in tipping or commissioning me, I have a Ko-fi page. Don't forget to check out the Fundamentals comic that I'm starting with my sister. I will see you in the next one. Bye!